Hey guys, tonight we're heading back more than 2,000 years to a time when the world was a patchwork of kingdoms, empires, and dusty little city-states, all dreaming of ruling each other. You're about to walk alongside a boy who's not just destined for the throne, but for the kind of wild, globe-spanning adventure that most people wouldn't even dare to imagine. You'll hear the clang of spears on bronze, smell the sweat of soldiers training in the summer heat, and maybe, just maybe, wonder if you could have survived the ride. Spoiler: you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you do, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there, because it's fun to think of this story weaving through all those time zones at once. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the hazy golden light of a Macedonian dawn. The air smells of olive trees and sun-warmed stone, and somewhere in the courtyard beyond your chamber, the clang of wooden practice swords has already started. This is the Palace of Pella, the bustling capital of the Kingdom of Macedon, where the smell of horse stables mingles with the perfume of royal gardens, and where a certain boy named Alexander, yes, that Alexander, is about to shape the world in ways nobody can predict. You're not exactly strolling into the story at a quiet moment. The year is 356 BCE, give or take a few dusty scrolls of historical dispute. Macedon isn't the polished, philosophical Athens you might imagine when you think of ancient Greece. It's more of a rugged frontier kingdom, half Greek in culture, half wild in attitude. The nobles pride themselves on riding fast horses, drinking deep from silver cups, and settling political disagreements with either a sharp spear or a sharper tongue. And here's your first fun fact. Alexander's father, Philip II, isn't just some stern royal in embroidered robes. He's a man who rebuilt this kingdom from a backwater into the dominant power of the Greek world. How? A blend of brilliant military reforms, ruthless diplomacy, and just enough charm to make allies forget they hated him last week. The Macedonian army now moves like a chessboard in motion, spears bristling in a phalanx, so dense that enemies often rethink the whole war idea halfway through the charge. But in the royal nursery, the spotlight isn't on Philip, it's on his son. Alexander's mother, Olympias, is no background figure. She's a princess from Epirus, fierce and deeply religious, with a reputation for both political savvy and a temper that could curdle milk. She tells young Alexander bedtime stories, not just about heroes, but about his own supposed divine ancestry. Because why settle for being royal when you can be semi-divine? You hear whispers around the court, how the night Alexander was born, the temple of Artemis in Ephesus burned down. The historian Plutarch claimed people took it as a sign that the goddess herself was too busy attending the birth of a world shaker to protect her own temple. Historians still argue whether this was just poetic propaganda or some overdramatic coincidence. But the rumor has stuck for centuries. Growing up, Alexander's daily life is a blend of palace comfort and warrior training. Imagine being woken at dawn, not by a gentle maidservant with breakfast, but by a grizzled veteran, tossing you a wooden spear and saying, "Time to see if you can still beat me." You'd run drills in the dusty yard until sweat stung your eyes, then spend the afternoon with your tutor, a man who just so happens to be Aristotle. Yes, the philosopher Aristotle, who's been roped into turning this prince into a scholar. One moment, Aristotle's explaining how bees make honey. The next, he's lecturing on Homer's Iliad, because knowing how Achilles thought is apparently as vital as knowing how to stab someone in the shield gap. And Alexander, he soaks it all in. His heroes aren't just local kings, but mythical figures: Achilles, Heracles, even Perseus. He keeps a copy of the Iliad annotated by Aristotle himself, and you get the sense that he's studying it less like a poem and more like a training manual. This mix of battlefield grit and high philosophy becomes his trademark. One quirky tidbit about Alexander as a boy. There's a story that when he was around 12, a Thessalian trader brought an enormous, unbroken horse named Bucephalus to Philip's court. The horse was so wild that none of the grooms could mount it without risking a quick trip to the afterlife. While the adults muttered about wasted silver, Alexander noticed something. They were all trying to ride the beast while it was staring at its own shadow. So he turned Bucephalus toward the sun, calmed him, and rode him straight across the yard. Philip, probably trying not to cry in front of the men, supposedly told him, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you. You can already see the shape of the future here. A young man with a fearless streak, an eye for detail, and the belief, nurtured by both his parents, that he's meant for something far beyond the rolling hills of Macedonia. But for now, he's still a boy, running between marble columns, chasing myths and sparring partners in equal measure. The road ahead is full of dust, danger, and glory, but the journey hasn't even left the palace gates yet. The palace smells different when your father is home. War leather, sweat, and the faint tang of bronze oil drift through the corridors before Philip II even strides into the courtyard. You stand on the polished flagstones, wooden practice sword in hand, pretending to study your footing. In truth, you're watching him, the man who commands not just armies, but the very air around him. His armor clinks faintly as he walks past, not bothering to glance at you. You're just a lion cub for now, still earning your claws. But he knows, and you know, that soon you'll need to use them. Macedonian childhood isn't exactly childhood by modern standards. You don't get a cozy phase where you're allowed to be useless. By your teens, you're already riding in hunting parties through oak forests, loosing arrows at wild boar that could turn and gut you in one charge. And it's not just sport. These hunts are combat rehearsals. The wild doesn't care that you're a prince. It cares only if you're quick enough to leap aside when a tusk comes for your ribs. One morning, the court wakes to news that Thracian tribes are stirring trouble along the northern frontier. It's not yet a full war, more like a test of Macedon's patience. But Philip decides it's a perfect opportunity for his son to learn more than Aristotle's scrolls can teach. And so you ride out, still technically a boy, armored lightly, a spear balanced in your hand. The hooves of Bucephalus drum the ground in a rhythm you could hum in your sleep. The battle is little more than a skirmish, but the world feels sharper here, colors more vivid, sounds more dangerous. You hear the war cries of the Thracians, their hair tied in knots, their shields painted with strange beasts. Philip's plan is precise. He lets them think they can flank the Macedonian line, only to crash into them with a hidden cavalry charge. You, of course, are riding in that charge the moment your spear point meets a painted shield. You realize that all the palace training is just the prelude. Here, your arms ache, your chest burns, and each heartbeat is its own drum. Afterward, you don't brag. That's not the way here. Instead, you take quiet note of what worked, what almost failed, and how even the smallest mistake could have left you face down in the dust. Philip sees that look in your eyes. Not fear, not quite, but the sober knowledge that victory is a thin, slippery thing. Back at Pella, your training intensifies. Wrestling, archery, swordplay, these aren't just sports. They're survival. Even the palace dining hall doubles as a classroom. Maps spread over the table. Discussions about supply lines over honeyed wine. Philip talks openly about the Greek city-states to the south. Their squabbles, their jealousies. They've underestimated Macedon for years, and he plans to change that. You're expected to listen, absorb, and one day, when the chance comes, act. And then comes the rumor, whispered like the punchline of some dark joke. Philip has taken another wife. In Macedon, this is politics, not just romance. But Olympias is not amused. Tensions run through the palace like cracks in old marble. At the wedding feast, one of Philip's men makes an offhand remark that your claim to the throne might not be so solid anymore. You don't hesitate. You throw your wine cup at his head and let him know exactly how unwise that comment was. It's reckless, maybe even dangerous, but it earns you a certain respect. The lion cub has teeth. The next test comes in Thessaly, where a local revolt threatens Philip's influence. You ride out again, this time leading a small detachment. It's your first real command. The night before battle, you walk alone along the campfires, watching men sharpen blades and dice for copper coins. You can almost feel their eyes on your back, measuring you, weighing whether you'll keep them alive come morning. At dawn, mist clings to the fields. You remember Aristotle's advice about knowing the ground better than your enemy. You notice a low ridge to the left, just enough to hide a flanking maneuver. You send a small unit there, timing the strike so it smashes into the enemy's side, just as you press the front. It works, cleanly, almost beautifully. The Thessalians scatter. You don't whoop in triumph. Instead, you ride the line, making sure no one gives chase too far and ends up cut down in some rash pursuit. When Philip hears of it, he doesn't offer flowery praise, just a short nod, the kind he gives to veteran commanders. And maybe that means more. A quirky tidbit: during one of these early campaigns, you take a moment, Mid-march, dusty and sore, to stop at a local village. You end up in a wrestling match with a shepherd who claims to have once beaten 3 men at once. You win, barely, and later laugh about it with your officers. Still, you can't help wondering if you'd have fared as well without the days spent on palace mats under the gaze of burly Macedonian trainers. Historians still argue whether these early experiences were Philip's calculated grooming or simply the necessities of a turbulent border kingdom. Either way, each one shapes you. You're not just a boy with a crown in waiting. You're learning how to hold it without crushing yourself under its weight. By the time you ride back to Pella, the palace feels smaller somehow, as if your eyes have outgrown it. You've tested your claws, and though they're not yet as sharp as they will be, they've tasted the air of battle, and that taste will never quite leave you. It's the sort of summer day that makes the air shimmer above the palace tiles, too hot for heavy armor, too still for a good hunt. You're in Pella, poring over a map Aristotle left behind, tracing the ragged edges of the Persian Empire with a finger when a servant bursts in without knocking. His breath is ragged, and he says, "Your father has been injured." No, not injured, killed. The world tilts. The words hang there, absurd, like someone declaring the sun has decided not to rise tomorrow. Philip II, who's outmaneuvered more enemies than you can count, whose voice could slice through the roar of battle. Gone? You push past the servant, out into the colonnade, and the murmurs ripple toward you like a tide. No one meets your eyes. The details are jagged, blood-soaked fragments. Philip had been an Aegae, attending the wedding of your sister Cleopatra to King Alexander of Epirus, your mother's own brother. The ceremony was meant to be a glittering display of unity, a reminder to all Greece that Macedon was untouchable. Instead, it became the perfect stage for a public assassination. They say the killer, one of Philip's bodyguards, named Pausanias, rushed forward as the king walked into the theater, cutting him down before anyone could react. Pausanias was struck down himself moments later, his blood mingling with your father's on the stones. Historians still argue whether this was a lone act of vengeance or part of a grand conspiracy. Was Pausanias driven by personal grievance, as the official story claimed? Or did someone, maybe from inside your own family, engineer the perfect opportunity? The whispers already swirl. Olympias hated Philip's new wife, and her family. The new wife's kin feared your succession. Athens, Thebes, even Persia had reasons to remove a man who was reshaping the balance of power. You don't have the luxury of indulging every rumor. In Macedon, a dead king means opportunity for anyone with a sword and ambition. And you, barely 20 years old, are suddenly the most obvious target and the most necessary shield. The palace shifts overnight into something sharper, more dangerous. Courtiers measure their words. Generals measure you. The treasury is locked tight. The barracks are put on alert. And Bucephalus is kept saddled more often than not. In the great hall, you sit where your father sat, the lion-skin cloak heavy on your shoulders. It smells faintly of him, leather and campfire smoke, but it feels different now. It's not a costume anymore. It's armor. Your first challenge arrives within days. Word that some of the northern tribes are stirring again, thinking this might be their moment to wriggle free of Macedonian control. Worse, whispers from the south tell of Athens and Thebes quietly considering revolt. They'd bowed to your father's Hellenic League after his victory at Chaeronea, but their loyalty was to his power, not to you. Olympias moves quickly, as always. She orders the execution of Philip's new wife and her infant, eliminating one line of succession with ruthless efficiency. It's the sort of action that horrifies some and reassures others. You watch her work and realize that whatever else she is, she's on your side. For now, you make your own moves. You ride to the army's main camp, not in the gold-threaded robes of a palace prince, but in armor, with dust on your boots. You address the troops directly, reminding them that it was you who charged with them at the Granicus drill. You who fought beside them in Thessaly. You promise them more victories, richer plunder, and, most importantly, steady leadership. Soldiers are less sentimental than they are practical. They cheer. One quirky moment. In the middle of this tense early rain, a delegation from Corinth arrives, expecting to negotiate with the boy king and subtly test your resolve. Instead, they find themselves being outflanked in conversation because you've memorized their city's trade routes, military strengths, and weak points from Aristotle's lessons. By the time they leave, they're not entirely sure who outmaneuvered whom. Still, the threat from Greece is real. Your father's League of City-States is built on shaky agreements and the fear of Macedonians' peers. Without a show of strength, it could crumble before you even have time to dream of Persia. But for now, your power is consolidating. The generals have pledged to you. The army has sworn its oaths, and your enemies are hesitating. You've stepped out of your father's shadow not by choice, but by necessity, and the sun out here is blinding. You don't waste time mourning in marble halls. Macedon's grip on Greece is a chain of oaths, and oaths snap when the hand holding them weakens. The moment your father's funeral smoke fades into the hills, you mount up. The first spark comes from Thebes. They'd been simmering under Macedonian control since Chaeronea, nursing their pride and their grudges. Now, with the boy king on the throne, they think the moment has come. Athens, too, is whispering about restoring freedom, which in Greek political language means, let's roll the dice on a rebellion. You ride south with speed that makes the roads blur. No drawn-out marches, no grand speeches, just steel, dust, and the sound of Bucephalus's breathing. The pace itself is part of the message. Rumor spreads faster than hoofbeats, and by the time you're near Thebes, they know you're coming. Thebes isn't just testing you, they're daring you. Their gates are closed, their walls manned. Some of your own advisors suggest negotiating. After all, a siege could drain your still fragile reign. But you've learned from Philip that hesitation is an invitation. So, you attack. The Macedonian army crashes against Theban walls like a storm tide. You lead from the front because nothing tells a rebel city that you're serious, quite like seeing you in person, spear in hand. The fighting is brutal, narrow streets turning into killing grounds, the air heavy with the metallic tang of blood. And then Thebes breaks. The city falls into your hands, and here comes the choice every ruler dreads: mercy or destruction. Thebes had once betrayed Greece to Persia. They'd stood against Macedon at Chaeronea. Now they'd revolted again. This isn't just about punishing them. It's about sending a message to every city-state watching from their hilltops. You choose fire. Thebes is razed, its walls torn down, its land divided among allies. Survivors are sold into slavery. It's harsh, unforgettably so, but in the calculus of ancient power, it works. Athens, seeing the smoke on the horizon, suddenly remembers how much they admire the Hellenic League. Historians still argue whether your destruction of Thebes was cold political necessity or a young ruler's overcorrection, eager to prove himself. Either way, it slams the door on Greek rebellion for now. With the uprisings crushed, you turn to the Hellenic League, that shaky federation of Greek states your father built. You meet them in Corinth, the city where mainland Greece narrows into a bottleneck between two seas. Leaders from Athens, Sparta, and everywhere in between gather under one roof, eyes weighing your every word. You don't shout, you don't threaten, you simply remind them of what Philip promised: unity under Macedon, not to enslave Greece, but to lead it against Persia. And you make them swear again, not just to you as king of Macedon, but as hegemon of the League. Oaths are renewed, hands laid on altars, sacred fires lit. A quirky little moment. In Corinth, you wander the agora after the formalities, slipping past merchants who barely recognize you without your royal cloak. You overhear an old man arguing with a friend about whether Macedonians even count as real Greeks. You lean in, grin, and say, "We'll see what the Persians think." Then you leave before they realize exactly who they were talking to. The League's oath isn't just ceremony. It's the bridge between you and your father's unfinished dream. Persia is vast, rich, and, at least in Greek imagination, ripe for payback after their invasions a century earlier. But the dream isn't just vengeance. It's about being the one to do what no one else has done. Unite the fractious Greek world in a single cause. As you ride back north, the smoke of Thebes still lingers in your memory, curling upward like a warning to anyone thinking of testing you again. You've tamed Greece for now, not with soft words, but with fire and oath. And in the stillness that follows, you can almost hear the Hellespont calling. The wind off the northern Aegean is sharp with salt and possibility. You stand on the prow of your flagship, the sun catching on the bronze fittings, and watch the coastline of Asia Minor grow sharper against the morning haze. Somewhere behind you, Greece lies quiet. Quiet because you've made it so. Ahead, Persia sprawls over more land than you can imagine, a patchwork of satrapies and silk roads, palaces and deserts. And you've decided to take it. Crossing the Hellespont isn't just a change of geography. It's stepping into the pages of the heroes you grew up idolizing. This narrow strait, where Europe and Asia lean in close enough to whisper, has seen armies pass before. Persians into Greece, Greeks into Persia. Trade ships, heavy with grain and incense. You're here to reverse the last century's humiliation, to turn Greek memory of Persian invasion into Macedonian conquest. Before the ships even dock, there's the ritual. You leap ashore in full armor, spear in hand, and hurl it into the soil, claiming Asia as your prize. Then you make the pilgrimage to Troy, not because you need the detour, but because Alexander, son of Philip, wants to stand where Achilles stood. You lay a wreath at the hero's supposed tomb, swap your armor for a set kept there in the temple. Whether it really belonged to Achilles is beside the point. You're wrapping yourself in the myth, letting it cling to you like a second skin. Historians still argue whether this Troy visit was genuine devotion or calculated theater. But either way, your men eat it up. They see their commander not just as a king, but as a living echo of the heroes they've heard about since childhood. Your army isn't huge by Persian standards, about 40,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, but it's a blade compared to the empire's blunt weight. Macedonian phalanxes, long sarissas, bristling like porcupine quills, backed by Greek hoplites, archers from Crete, and horsemen from Thessaly. Behind them trail the camp followers, blacksmiths, cooks, merchants, women, and children. Because wars are never just soldiers and steel. A quirky little moment from the crossing. One of your officers swears he sees a sea serpent keeping pace with the lead ships. The story spreads so quickly that by the time you reach Asia, half the army is convinced Poseidon himself is escorting you. You don't deny it. Why waste a good omen? The first Persian resistance appears sooner than you'd like. On the plains near the river Granicus, a satrap's army waits. Persian cavalry in gleaming scale armor. Greek mercenaries, stiff in their bronze. Your advisors suggest waiting for morning, resting the men after the march. You don't. Waiting gives them time to reinforce. You order the attack. The river's current tugs at your legs as you spur Bucephalus forward. Persian lances aim for your chest, but your spear finds a gap first. The fighting is chaos. Water splashing, horses screaming, sun glinting on bloodied blades. At one point, a Persian noble's sword arcs toward your head, only for Clytus the Black, your officer, to cut him down mid-swing. You file the dead away for later. When the dust settles, the Persians break. The Greek mercenaries fight to the last, refusing quarter, and your men cut them down. Historians still argue whether this was ruthless necessity or a deliberate warning to all Greek soldiers fighting for Persia. After Granicus, the road into Asia Minor lies open. Cities start surrendering before you even reach their gates. Some offer gold and supplies. Others send out their leaders barefoot, olive branches in hand. You treat the cooperative ones well, partly to encourage others, partly because you need their ports and grain. You make camp one night in the shadow of Mount Ida, the sea air mixing with the scent of pine and campfires. The men are in high spirits, swapping stories of the crossing and the battle, some already exaggerating how many Persians they personally skewered. You sit with your commanders, plotting the next moves inland. Asia feels different beneath your boots, older, heavier with history, and sprawling beyond sight. But the principle remains the same as back in Greece. Move fast, strike hard, and never give your enemies time to breathe. You've stepped off the edge of Europe, and now there's only forward. The river Granicus is calm now, just another ribbon of water threading through the Anatolian plains. But when you think of it, you don't see calm. You see churned foam, flailing hooves, and the glint of Persian blades closing in. You'd crossed it once already in the telling. But this is the moment that nearly broke the whole dream before it even began. It starts with heat. Late spring, the Anatolian sun hanging heavy in the sky. The dust from the march caking the inside of your mouth. Scouts return with news. A Persian satrap coalition, Spithridates, Rusaces, and their Greek mercenary captain, Memnon of Rhodes, has drawn up along the far bank of the Granicus. Cavalry in the front, mercenary hoplites behind. The river itself as their shield. Your senior officers, Parmenion chief among them, urge caution. The Persians have the high ground, the sun at their backs, and the river between you. He suggests making camp, attacking in the cool dawn when the odds are less suicidal. But dawn gives them time to scatter, to fortify, to melt into the hills. You've seen what hesitation costs. So you look Parmenion in the eye and tell him you'll fight now. The river isn't wide, but it's treacherous, deep in places, slippery with silt. You form the phalanx, sarissas bristling, cavalry massing at the wings. The order is given, and you ride Bucephalus straight into the current. The water grabs at your legs. The splashes rise high as horses plunge forward. Arrows hiss down from the far bank. You're halfway across when the Persian cavalry slams into you. Lances glance off shields. Spears shatter against bronze. Horses rear and scream. It's a close quarters brawl in knee-deep water. Each step an effort. You lean forward, thrusting overhand at a Persian noble's exposed throat, feeling the resistance give way. Then Spithridates comes for you. His axe swings down, a killing blow, when Clytus the Black bursts in, severing his arm before the strike can land. Clytus doesn't grin or boast, just nods once, as if to say, "Not today." The melee surges toward the far bank. Your cavalry forges a wedge, driving the Persians back onto the plain, where the phalanx can grind forward. The Greek mercenaries in Persian pay hold their ground stubbornly, their hoplite shields locking tight. Macedonian discipline wears them down, but it's slow, bitter work. By the time the last line buckles, the river has gone from blue to red-brown. When the fighting's over, the satraps are dead, their cavalry scattered. The mercenaries, those who survive, are offered neither ransom nor parole. You order them cut down. Harsh, yes, but the message is clear. No Greek will serve the great king and live to fight again. Historians still argue whether this was a cold-blooded necessity or the impulsive wrath of a young commander making an example. A quirky little scene unfolds after the battle. As you walk the field, a local farmer approaches with a jug of wine, offering it shyly. He says his father told him of a dream, 2 lions fighting in the river, and that now he's seen it come true. You laugh, take a sip, and pour the rest onto the ground for the dead. The victory at Granicus cracks the Persian grip on Asia Minor. City after city sends envoys bearing keys, gold, and hostages as signs of surrender. Sardis opens its gates without a fight. Ephesus hails you as a liberator and promptly swaps its government for one friendlier to your cause. At night, you lie in your tent, listening to the muffled sounds of camp, the low murmur of dice games, the faint whinny of horses, and think about that axe blow that almost ended you. The river came close to swallowing the dream, but instead, it's carried you deeper into Persia's lands. And you're not planning to stop. The road to Gordium winds through rolling Anatolian hills, dotted with spring blossoms and the occasional goat that looks like it knows something you don't. Word has been spreading ahead of you, stories of the young Macedonian king who scattered the Persians at the Granicus and took cities without needing to batter down their gates. By the time your column approaches the old Phrygian capital, the city is already buzzing with expectation. Gordium isn't just another waypoint on the march. It's a place wrapped in legend, older than the Persian Empire itself. Here, in the Temple of Zeus, locals will remind you it's actually Sabazios, but the Greeks prefer their own names. Sits a relic every ambitious man has heard of, the Gordian knot. The story goes like this. Centuries ago, when Phrygia had no king, an oracle declared that the next ruler would be the man who rode into the city in an ox cart. Along came a humble peasant named Gordius, steering just such a cart. The grateful people crowned him king, and in honor of the event, Gordius tied his cart to a post in the temple with a knot so intricate no one could undo it. The oracle, always happy to raise the stakes, added that whoever could untie it would rule all of Asia. You walk into the temple courtyard under the wary eyes of priests in long, earth-colored robes. There it is, a weathered wooden cart, its yoke lashed to the post with thick cornel bark rope, knotted in loops and twists so dense it looks more like a wooden sculpture than something meant to be undone. The rope is ancient, dry, and darkened with age, and has fused in places like petrified roots. Your officers gather close. Some murmur about how many have tried and failed, kings and adventurers alike. You crouch, running your fingers over the knot, tracing each bend. You could spend hours, days even, teasing at each loop with a pick or a blade of grass, trying to solve it like a puzzle. Or you could not. You straighten, look at the knot one last time, and draw your sword. In one swift motion, steel flashing in the temple's dim light, you slice clean through the rope. The halves tumble to the ground, the knot undone in the most literal, efficient sense possible. A stunned silence hangs in the air. Then you say, almost too casually, "It doesn't matter how it's untied." That line, whether you actually said it or not, will travel faster than your army. To some, it's proof of your genius, cutting through problems instead of getting tangled in them. To others, it's arrogance, a desecration of a sacred object. Priests will later argue whether you fulfilled the prophecy or cheated it entirely. But the knot is gone, and your men love the audacity of it. That night, the city hosts a feast in your honor. Phrygian musicians pluck at long-necked lutes, while dancers whirl in embroidered cloaks. A platter of roasted lamb is set before you, seasoned with herbs from the surrounding hills. Over the clatter of cups and laughter, you catch your officers repeating the story of the knot, each version already slightly different from the last. Some swear you hacked it in anger, others that you smiled like you'd planned it all along. The next morning, the knot's frayed remains are bundled and stored away as relics. You march on, leaving Gordium behind. But the prophecy marches with you now, stitched into the way your soldiers look at you. Ruler of all Asia? That no longer sounds like a legend. It sounds like a plan. The Persians call it Halicarnassus. To you, it's just another name on the list, another stronghold between you and the heart of the empire. But your scouts whisper a different tone when they say it. The city isn't just fortified, it's been built to laugh at sieges. White limestone walls rear up from the harbor, tier upon tier, glinting in the Aegean sun. They were the pride of Mausolus. Yes, the same satrap whose tomb became one of the 7 wonders of the world. And they are now the pride of Memnon of Rhodes, the Persian commander you've been chasing across Anatolia. He's no fool. He knows he can't beat you in the open. So he's hunkered down here with every trick, every ship, and every mercenary he can scrape together. The city has double walls, stone and mortar, thick enough to shrug off a catapult shot, with a moat that sparkles deceptively in the morning light. The harbor bristles with triremes, their black painted prows shaped like rams' heads, ready to punch holes in any ship stupid enough to come close. And above it all, the fortress of Salmachis squats like a smug stone giant, daring you to try. You arrive with siege engines in tow, tall, wheeled towers, clad in wet hides to resist fire, catapults wound tight with the promise of destruction. The engineers rub their hands together, already picking spots where the ground will hold. But the first day tells you this won't be a quick fight. Every time your men push forward to set the towers, arrows rain down from murder holes, shafts whistling past your ears. Stones the size of amphorae crash from the walls, sending your lines scrambling. Even when your catapults find their mark, the defenders pour sand and water into the cracks, patching damage overnight. The days bleed together, hammering at the walls by daylight, planning new angles by torchlight. One afternoon, a fire breaks out among your siege towers when the wind shifts and flaming pitch from the walls finds its mark. The hides hiss and steam, but the flames spread, and by the time the smoke clears, you've lost 3 towers and a good number of men. Memnon isn't content to hide behind stone. Under cover of night, he sends sorties, small, fast groups of men who slip out, torch supply wagons, and vanish before the alarm is fully raised. You wake one morning to find half your rations smoldering in the dirt, and your officers muttering about how long you can afford this game. But you know, walls can't fight forever. Every wall has a weak seam. It's just a question of finding it before the morale in your camp wears thin. Your solution is as much about psychology as stone. One dawn, you order a concentrated strike, not at the fortress, but at a section of the lower city wall where the defenders seem thinner. Siege towers rumble forward under a barrage of arrows, shields overlapping in a glittering roof above the men pushing them. The air fills with the deep thunk of catapults loosing their payloads, stone and fire arcing overhead. The walls hold, but barely. You can see them sag under the pounding. The defenders are scrambling, shouting to each other, and for the first time, the rhythm of their counterattack falters. That's when you send in the ladders. Your men swarm upward, shields over their heads, jostling for a foothold. The clash is brutal, sword against spear, shield against shield. But the sight of your banners on the wall sends a ripple through the city below. The defenders rally and push back, and though you're driven off that day, the damage is done. Halicarnassus has learned you can reach them. The final act isn't a glorious breach. It's quieter. Memnon, calculating the cost, chooses to burn much of the city and slip away under cover of night, rather than let you take him trapped. When the smoke clears, you walk the streets that are now yours, blackened, gutted, but no longer unconquerable. Some will say it was a hollow victory, that the city you took is half ash. But among your men, it's proof. There is no wall in Asia you can't reach, no fortress too proud to fall. And Memnon, he's still out there, somewhere, a shadow waiting in the east. You know you'll meet again. The desert does not care about kings. It does not care about gold, about banners, about the weight of crowns. It only cares that the sun rises hotter every hour, that the wind carries grit sharp enough to sting your teeth, and that anything, man, beast, or empire that stays too long will be swallowed whole. But here you are, leading your army straight into it. You've left the coast behind, traded the salty bite of the sea for the dry rasp of wind that smells faintly of dust and stone. Ahead lies Egypt, and beyond Egypt, the heart of the Persian satrapies along the Nile. Your advisors whispered of risk, how the desert will strip your army's strength, faster than any enemy. You heard them, and you ignored them. The pharaoh ruling here now is no god-king of legend, but a Persian puppet, Darius's man on the Nile. Still, he commands the loyalty of cities and temples, and the Persian garrisons here are not idle. Taking Egypt will mean cutting deep into the empire's lifeline, choking its grain shipments, and showing the world that not even the oldest throne on earth is beyond your reach. The march is brutal from the first step. By day, the heat presses down like a living thing. By night, the cold bites through your cloak and into your bones. The sand shifts treacherously underfoot, swallowing wagon wheels and testing the patience of your engineers. Every drop of water is guarded like treasure, stored in clay jars, swaddled in damp cloth, and rationed with the precision of a miser counting coins. Your men stripped down to linen tunics, bronze gleaming on bare arms. The horses are restless, snorting, their hooves sinking into the loose earth. And yet, the rhythm of the march holds. One step, another, and another. When the first oasis appears, a cluster of palm trees shimmering in the heat haze, it feels almost like a trick of the eye. But the water is real, cool, and sweet. And for a moment, the desert is forgotten in the sound of men drinking, laughing, and washing the salt from their skin. You know better than to linger too long. As you draw closer to the Nile Delta, signs of the pharaoh's reach appear. Stone watchtowers, their shadows stretching long over the sand. Patrols that melt away before your approach, sending word ahead. You hear rumors that the Persian governor is retreating to Memphis, drawing his forces close. It doesn't matter. You've come too far to be turned aside. When the city finally rises before you, it is like nothing in Greece or Persia. Great pylons painted with gods and kings, courtyards shaded by papyrus, statues that have watched armies come and go for 1,000 years. The walls are thick, but the Nile is your ally. You cut supply lines with swift raids along the riverbanks, seizing grain barges and scattering their escorts. Slowly, the city begins to choke. The pharaoh, your pharaoh now, though he will never call you that, sends envoys draped in fine linen, their eyes dark with calculation. They speak of tribute, of shared rule, of letting the Persians remain in name, while you hold the reins in truth. You listen politely, and then you take the city outright. It is not a quick conquest. Egypt bows slowly, with the weight of centuries behind its pride, but it bows all the same. When the sun sets over the Nile at night, its red light turning the river to molten gold, you stand in the courtyard of a palace built by kings, long turned to dust, and you feel something shift. Here, in the oldest kingdom still standing, you have placed your mark. The desert has not swallowed you. The pharaoh's throne is empty, and the grain of Egypt now flows wherever you command. You've been chasing a ghost. Ever since Isis, Darius III has been the shadow ahead of you, always just beyond the reach of your spear, always vanishing into the horizon before you can close your hand around him. And now, finally, you're ready to drive straight into the heart of his empire. The path there is not a straight line. It's a corridor of mountains, deserts, and cities bound together by the royal road. This is not the wild frontier. This is the beating core of Persia, the land that paid for its palaces in gold and its wars in silver. Every step forward now is a step into the lion's den. Your army moves with the precision of a blade being drawn. Scouts range ahead along the road, while engineers measure and repair bridges that have stood since the days of Cyrus the Great. The countryside is strangely quiet, not the peace of safety, but the silence before a storm. You see burnt villages, grain stores put to the torch, and wells choked with stones. Darius is retreating, but he's bleeding the land behind him dry. So you will drink dust before you drink water. Through the passes of the Zagros Mountains, the air grows thin and sharp. The peaks are jagged, the valleys narrow enough for a single army to be trapped and destroyed. Here, every bend in the road is watched by your veterans like a wolf's den. You keep the pace brutal, no time to let fear or fatigue set in. Then comes Persepolis. It is not merely a city, it is a statement carved into the earth. Rising from its stone platform, its terraces and stairways seem to float above the plain. Columns as tall as watchtowers are carved with kings, lions, bulls, and warriors locked in eternal battle. The very air hums with the weight of ceremony, of centuries in which the King of Kings received tribute from every corner of the known world. But when you enter, the streets are nearly empty. Darius has fled eastward again, and the treasures of his court have gone with him. What remains is still enough to make your quartermasters dizzy. Warehouses stacked with ivory, gold, and the colored fabrics of far-off lands. For days, you camp here. Some say you linger because Persepolis is too magnificent to leave unstudied. Others whisper it is because you mean to make a statement, not just to Persia, but to all who will hear the story in years to come. And then, one night, the flames begin. No one will agree later on how they started. Some claim it was drunken soldiers acting without orders. Others say it was your command. a calculated act to burn away the symbol of Persian supremacy. The fire spreads quickly through the wooden beams and painted halls, turning the great palaces into blackened skeletons against the night sky. The air smells of cedar, resin, and ash. Statues crack in the heat, their faces shattering into dust. From the terraces, you watch the city that once hosted kings become nothing more than embers drifting upward like lost prayers. By dawn, Persepolis is a ruin. And though your men still march on, the message is already carried far and wide. The heart of Persia has been pierced. The age of Darius is fading, and in its place rises your own, here, in the smoldering center of an empire. You are no longer merely a conqueror. You are the one who decides what survives and what is consigned to history's ashes. The night air in Persepolis is thick with the scent of centuries. Burnished cedar beams oiled smooth by craftsmen long gone, honey wax on the floor tiles, and the sharp resin of frankincense curling from bronze censers. You walk beneath the high vault of the Apadana, the great audience hall of kings, where 100 fluted columns rise like stone trees, their capitals carved into the twin heads of bulls. The reliefs along the stairways are alive in the torchlight. Persian nobles with long beards and curled hair, envoys from Egypt and India carrying gifts, gold, ivory, leopard skins, jars of rare unguents. This was not merely a palace. This was the ceremonial heart of an empire that stretched farther than the horizon. Now it is yours. The wealth is staggering. Silver ingots stacked in neat walls taller than a man. Bowls and plates beaten from gold so thin you could bend them in your hand. Shelves sagging under precious lapis, turquoise, emerald. Rolls of silk the color of peacock feathers. Your soldiers wander the storerooms like men in a dream. Fingers grazing treasures they never imagined holding. The banquet begins with a roar of victory. Amphorae of wine are cracked open, spilling rivers of dark red into gilded cups. Platters of roasted lamb and kid are set down on the marble floors because the tables cannot hold them all. Musicians pluck lyres and blow on reed pipes, their melodies half buried beneath the shouts of men who have cheated death too many times to care about decorum. You drink with them, feeling the strange heat of triumph and exhaustion in your blood. It is Thais, the Athenian courtesan, famed for her beauty and sharper tongue, who leans across the table. Her voice is low, but carries. "Alexander," she says, "what better end for the palace of Xerxes than to burn it as he once burned Athens? Let the world see Greece's vengeance in the skies of Persia." At first, you laugh. It is a drunken jest, no more. But the words take root. You think of the stories told to you as a boy, of Xerxes' fleet crossing into Greece, of temples torn down and statues defiled. Perhaps this is justice. Perhaps this is theater. Or perhaps you simply wish to show the world that the old order is gone forever. You stand, take a torch from the wall, and hold it high. The wine in your veins feels like fire already. Shouts rise as others follow your lead. Torches passed hand to hand. Laughter and cheers ring in under the vaults. The first flames take the cedar beams greedily, the resin popping like musket fire. Tapestries curl and blacken, their embroidered hunts and battles twisting into grotesque shadows. Oil lamps shatter in the heat, sending molten bronze dripping down the steps. The smoke thickens, tasting of pitch and old incense. Outside, the night blooms orange. Some of your generals stand silent. Ptolemy, face impassive. Parmenion, muttering that a king should preserve, not destroy. Others howl in approval, heaving more torches into the doorways. You feel the heat whip your skin, the hair-singeing wind of it rushing up from the collapsing roof beams. The noise is like a siege, wood splitting, marble cracking, the deep groan of a structure dying. By dawn, Persepolis is a ruin. Charred beams lie like the bones of some enormous beast. The carved reliefs are pitted and blackened, the stone flaking where the heat bit deep. Ash drifts through the streets, settling on the hair and shoulders of silent Persians watching from a distance. Your soldiers say little now. Some avoid your gaze. Was this justice for Athens, or a drunken folly you will regret? Historians will argue for centuries, but the truth is simpler. That night, under the drunken spell of victory, you decided the jewel of Persia should burn, and you made it so. The columns still stand, but they stand in a city that will never live again. The smoke of Persepolis still lingers in your clothes when the news reaches you. Darius is alive. Not only alive, he is fleeing north, deeper into the jagged spine of the Persian mountains. His court splintered, and his authority hanging by a thread. Your war is not over. The empire's heart may have stopped beating in Persepolis, but its ghost runs before you, wearing a crown. The route is cruel. The land rises in a chain of steep ridges and valleys, each one a fortress made by the earth itself. The road, if it can be called that, winds between cliffs that sweat in the noonday heat, their faces streaked with quartz like scars. At night, the air turns razor cold, and frost slicks the stones. You ride wrapped in your cloak, the iron of your armor leaching warmth from your bones. Your men curse the terrain, their horses stumbling over loose shale. Still, the pace does not slow. Darius has only a handful of loyal companions left, but he knows these lands better than you do. He rides for Bactria, perhaps to raise another army, perhaps only to disappear into the folds of Asia. You will not give him that chance. Villages appear and vanish like mirages, stone huts clinging to the slopes, women carrying water in clay jars, boys pausing in their games to watch the dust of your passing. Some give you food, flat bread still warm from the fire, bowls of goat's milk. Others offer nothing but shuttered doors. You leave them behind, the hoofbeats fading into the high silence. On the third day, scouts return with word. Darius is less than a day ahead, but the road narrows here, curling along a precipice with the mountains leaning close on either side. You know a determined rearguard could hold such a pass for days. Instead, you find signs of panic, abandoned wagons, shattered amphorae, the prints of horses driven to exhaustion. He is running, not fighting. The chase becomes a test of endurance. The air thins, and every breath feels like drinking through a reed. Your lips crack from the wind. Your eyes sting with dust. At night, campfires burn low to hide your presence, the flames barely enough to warm your fingers. The stars are so sharp they seem to pierce the sky. Then, One evening, a lone rider stumbles into your camp. His robe is torn, his face drawn and hollow. He kneels, not in surrender to you, but in despair. The words tumble out. Darius is no longer king. Bessus, his own satrap and kinsman, has seized him, ostensibly to protect him from you, but really to claim Persia for himself. The once great king of kings is now a prisoner, bound in a wagon, dragged toward the east. It is not enough. Victory must be final. You drive your men harder, cutting through the mountain passes, as if the stones themselves could be moved by will. Your cavalry rides ahead, a steel-tipped spear thrust into the night. The trail grows fresher. Discarded cloaks, hoof prints still damp in the mud. One dawn, you crest a ridge and see them, a knot of riders winding through the valley below, a wagon in their midst. But before you can close the gap, the knot breaks apart. Some flee, spurring their horses toward the rising sun. Others cluster around the wagon, then scatter, leaving it behind. By the time you reach it, it is too late. Inside lies Darius, pierced by the spears of his own men, abandoned to bleed out on the boards. His eyes meet yours briefly, clouded, searching, as if weighing whether you are enemy or deliverer. You offer him water, a promise of vengeance on his murderers. He dies before you finish speaking. There is no battle, no triumphal procession, only the stillness of the valley and the smell of blood on the cold morning air. You take his royal cloak, not as plunder, but as a shroud. The man who once ruled from the Nile to the Indus will be given a king's burial, and the man who killed him will not escape you. The chase is not over. It has simply changed its prey. Bactria is yours now, not by storming its walls, but by chasing down the last embers of resistance and stamping them out before they could catch flame. Bessus, Darius's murderer, is in chains. His betrayal is answered with a punishment as public as it is final. Stripped naked, bound to two bent trees, his body torn apart as the trunks spring back. Word of it travels faster than your army, whispering through bazaars and caravanserais. Alexander punishes treachery as swiftly as he rewards loyalty. But you know fear alone will not hold an empire together. Persia is too vast for the Macedonian spear to pierce every corner at once. If you are to keep it whole, you must stitch its people into your rule, binding the old world and the new with something stronger than conquest. The needle you choose is marriage. It is not the marriage your soldiers expect. They picture a Macedonian princess, someone from home to bear your heirs. Instead, you announce you will wed Roxana, the daughter of a Bactrian noble, a woman whose beauty is spoken of as if it were a kind of sorcery. The camp buzzes with disbelief. Some call it strategy, others weakness, a few a romantic whim. But you know what you are doing. In one ceremony, you will take not only a wife, but a people into your fold. The day arrives in a hall hung with Persian silks and garlands of alpine flowers. Outside, the wind combs through the high grass. Inside, the air is warm with the scent of wine and roasted lamb. Macedonian generals in bronze stand beside Persian satraps in flowing robes. The mingling is awkward at first. Two worlds measuring each other across the feast tables. But the wine loosens tongues, and laughter begins to stitch the room together. Roxana enters in a gown of deep blue, the fabric catching light like ripples on water. A thin circlet of gold rests on her hair, and in her eyes there is neither fear nor surrender, only the cool appraisal of a woman who knows she is about to become queen. When she takes your hand, it is firm, the grip of an equal. The rites blend Macedonian and Persian custom. You pour libations to the gods of both lands. She offers bread and salt as a symbol of hospitality that will now bind your households. The vows are spoken in 2 languages. Somewhere in the hall, a lyre plays a melody that is older than either of your peoples, something that belongs to the mountains themselves. When the feast begins, roasted game birds are carried out on silver platters, and amphorae of wine are uncorked until the air smells of grapes. Macedonians dance in stamping circles, Persians in slow, graceful arcs. Before the night is over, the 2 styles knot together into something new, a dance that has never existed before this day. It is more than celebration. This is performance, politics, theater, all staged for the benefit of the watching lords who will carry tales of the wedding back to their provinces. They will say, Alexander is no foreign despot, but a man who honors Persian blood and shares his table with its nobility, that he is here to unite, not to erase. Later, in the quiet after the revelry, the 2 of you stand at the balcony. The moon hangs over the jagged horizon, pale as a coin. Somewhere far below, the dark ribbon of the Oxus River twists toward the east. Roxana looks out at the land, then at you, and says, not as a question, but as a truth, they will follow us now. An empire cannot be built on the sword alone. Tonight you have learned it can also be built on a shared cup of wine, a clasped hand, and the promise of a life bound together. The soldiers may see this as a wedding. You know it for what it truly is, an alliance strong enough to hold the world you are still conquering. The ink on your marriage vows is barely dry before your gaze drifts eastward again. Persia is no longer enough. Your maps, smudged and creased from years of campaign, show a curious emptiness beyond the lands of Bactria and Sogdiana, a blank space where cartographers have only scratched vague mountains and rivers like a child's guess. You have never been able to resist a blank space. The army is less enthused. They have marched for years, fought in deserts, mountains, and across rivers that seemed too wide for any mortal to cross. They thought perhaps the wedding meant rest, maybe even a return home. Instead, you speak of India, the place where rumor claims gold flows in the rivers, and war elephants are as common as oxen. The men groan, but they shoulder their spears. The road east is not a road at all, but a constant negotiation with the land. Sheer ridges of rock force the column into narrow defiles, where 100 men feel like 1,000 pressed shoulder to shoulder. Wind whips between peaks, tugging at cloaks and carrying away curses in Macedonian, Greek, and now Persian. Above, snowcaps glitter, untouched by the summer heat below. Villages appear like mirages, clusters of mud brick homes clinging to the sides of ravines, their terraced fields green against the gray stone. Some welcome you with wary hospitality, bringing bowls of milk and flatbread. Others vanish before you arrive, leaving only the hiss of the wind through empty doorways. In each place, your interpreters scribble notes. Every hill, every stream is charted. The blank edges of your maps begin to curl inward as new ink replaces empty space. Crossing the Hindu Kush, is an ordeal that chews at even your best men. Thin air leaves lungs burning. Mules collapse under their loads. Avalanches whisper down slopes without warning. Nights are a brittle kind of cold. The stars, hard points of light in a sky that feels closer than the ground. Yet in those nights, around campfires, fed with twisted brush, the soldiers tell stories of home, of loves lost and found, of the day when this endless march will finally end. And then, one morning, the air changes. It is thicker, heavier with moisture, scented faintly with something sweet and green. You crest a ridge, and there it is, India, a valley spilling out below you like a painted scroll, wide rivers looping through forests, the heat shimmering above endless fields, strange birds, flashing colors you've never seen before. The men stare, some smile, others grip their spears tighter. You know this is only the beginning. India will not bow as Persia did. Here, kings rule with their own armies, their own gods, their own pride. But the edge of the map has always called to you, and now you stand upon it, ready to push past its boundaries. That night, in your tent, you unroll the old map. The blank space is almost gone now, replaced with the neat lines of valleys, rivers, and peaks your scribes have traced these past months. You tap the furthest point inked in and smile, not because the map is full, but because beyond that point lies a new blankness, another mystery. For you, conquest has never been just about land. It is about filling the world with stories, until there are no more edges left to chase. They call it Ornos. The locals say the name in a low voice, as though the syllables themselves might conjure the place. A fortress carved by the gods, perched atop cliffs so sheer that even birds think twice before flying near. It sits on a solitary mountain, spur above the Indus River. Its slopes dropping away like the sides of a colossal altar. The stories are older than memory. How a hero of myth once tried to take it and failed. How even the great Heracles had turned back. You do not turn back. Your march through the foothills is already legend in the making. Villages surrendering without a fight. Others vanishing in the forests at your approach. But Arnos is different. Here, the people don't flee. They climb. They retreat into the fortress above, mocking you from a height where your arrows cannot reach. Their laughter rolls down the rock face like water, and it burns hotter than any insult from a king. The climb begins at dawn. Ropes, ladders, and the iron will of men who have followed you since Macedonia's fields. These are your siege engines. The slopes are treacherous, each step a gamble on loose shale and knife-edged ridges. At times, the mountain seems to peel your army from its flanks, sending men tumbling into the gullies below. You order an approach from a neighboring ridge, a higher peak overlooking Aornos itself. It takes days of back-breaking hauling, timbers dragged up by sweating soldiers, earth packed into platforms, and stone throwers assembled on the very spine of the world. From there, you can fire down into the stronghold, reversing the balance. Suddenly, the impregnable feels vulnerable. The defenders do not yield. They fight with the desperation of those who know there is nowhere left to run. Arrows hiss from above. Spears shatter against shields. And the air fills with the shouts of men battling on ledges barely wide enough for their feet. More than once, you look down and see the Indus far below, a green ribbon slicing the valley, and you wonder if a fall from this height ends in silence before it ends in pain. Then one morning, your scouts find a weakness, a narrow, hidden path winding along the cliffside, shielded from the defenders' eyes. You send your best men, light-armed and quick, creeping along in the pre-dawn dark. By midday, they are in. A horn sounds, a cry rises, and chaos breaks loose within the fortress. Gates are forced open from the inside, and your army pours in like a flood. When the dust settles, you stand at the summit. The air is thin, the sky so wide it feels you could step into it. Below, the Indus twists through the valley like a serpent, and all around are mountains, hundreds of them, each its own fortress. Aornos lies broken at your feet, its defenders scattered or slain. You have taken the rock that defied Heracles himself. And yet, as the wind whips at your cloak, you know this is not an end. Victories in these lands are like holding water in your hands, impressive for a moment, then gone. Tomorrow, there will be another mountain, another stronghold, another people who have never heard your name. But for tonight, you let yourself believe that even the gods might nod in approval. The mountains rise like a wall at the edge of the world, snow-capped, jagged, and impossibly vast. The Hindu Kush looms ahead, as though some titan had decided to seal off the land with stone. The name itself, whispered by guides with frost on their beards, means killer of Hindus, though you suspect it kills without discrimination. You've crossed rivers, deserts, and jungles in this campaign. But this is different. This is a challenge, measured not in battles, but in breaths. You begin the ascent in late autumn. Bad timing by every sensible measure. The locals told you to wait for spring. You laughed. You faced worse, you think. Then the wind hits you. It comes screaming down the valleys like an army of invisible archers, stripping the warmth from your bones in moments. Your men march in single file, each step crunching into the snow. Horses stumble on ice-slick rocks, their breath steaming in the air before freezing into tiny crystals. Pack animals collapse without warning, their loads spilling into drifts, where they will remain until the thaw. The thin air makes even the strongest pant like they've run a marathon. And every mile feels like two. Nights are the worst. Fires burn low because wood is scarce, and the cold seeps in the tents like a living thing. You hear the coughs of your soldiers, growing harsher each evening. Men wake with frost-bitten fingers, their armor rimmed with ice. One morning, you find the sentry frozen where he stood, eyes still open, staring out into the white nothing. Still, the army moves. You bribe local guides with gold, food, anything they'll take, and they lead you through passes narrow enough to make you hold your breath as you walk along them. One misstep, and you vanish into the clouds below. At times, avalanches roar down the slopes, sweeping rock and snow in a thunder that rattles your teeth. And yet, even here, the mountains give you moments of beauty. At dawn, the peaks blaze gold, as though the sun itself has decided to crown you. At night, the stars seem close enough to pluck from the sky. In these moments, the men speak less of war and more of home, of the scent of olive groves, the warmth of summer fields, the laughter of their children. You realize that while you drive them forward with visions of glory, they keep moving with memories of what they've left behind. When at last you descend, the land changes almost instantly. Snow becomes rock, rock becomes grass, and grass becomes the rich earth of a new valley. The men cheer, not for victory, but for survival. You have crossed a barrier that has swallowed entire armies. Many of your enemies will hear of this and call it madness. Others will call it destiny. You call it one more step east, and even as you savor the relief of warmer air, you know the mountains are not finished with you. They have tested your resolve, thinned your ranks, and reminded you that no conqueror commands nature. But for now, you walk in the sun again, and that feels like victory enough. You can smell it before you see it. The air grows damp and heavy, and the low, distant roar of water becomes a constant in your ears. After weeks of dry mountain wind and sparse streams, the sight hits you like a vision: the river. Broad, slow-moving, and glinting gold in the late afternoon sun, it stretches wider than any your men have seen. But this is no mere ribbon of water. This is a barrier. It's the river of kings, they tell you, the Hydaspes. It is said to guard the lands beyond like a coiled serpent. On the far bank, the land is green, thick with trees. Somewhere in that emerald haze, a ruler watches you. His name is Porus, a king of men and elephants. His court is carved from the earth of this place. His army drawn from villages that have lived by this water for generations. He is no petty chieftain. He commands a force as old as the river itself. You camp by the bank, both armies staring across the current. The river runs fast, swollen by the monsoon rains that have only just begun to fade. Its surface looks deceptively calm, but scouts return with news of undercurrents that could sweep a horse away in seconds. You can feel Porus watching, and you suspect he smiles each time the current foils your thoughts. For days, it is a silent chess game. He patrols the far bank, shifting his cavalry where he thinks you might cross. You mirror him, feinting upriver and down, searching for the weakness that refuses to show itself. The men grow restless. Some curse the river openly. Others begin to treat it like a living enemy. Then comes the night when you act. Rain falls in a fine mist, cloaking the campfires. Under cover of darkness, you lead a chosen force upriver, guided by local fishermen who know where the islands lie, hidden in the current. Your oarsmen row without sound, muscles moving like shadows. The water laps against the hull, cold as melted snow. Halfway across, the rain turns to a downpour. The sky splits with lightning, and the river comes alive, surging at the banks, tugging at your boats like some great beast trying to drag you under. Men grit their teeth, clinging to shields and spears as the current hurls spray in their faces. When you reach the far shore, you emerge into knee-deep mud. Your boots sink with each step, and you can hear the distant rhythmic rumble, a sound like thunder, but steadier. It is not thunder, it is the war elephants, their tusks gleaming in the stormlight, their riders cloaked in bronze and leather. Porus has come to meet you. The standoff is over. The river is behind you now, and ahead lies the roar of beasts and the cry of men. You draw your sword, and for a heartbeat, the rain feels warm against your skin. The river had dared to defy you, but you have crossed it, Now, it is the king himself who must decide whether he will bend or break. The battle with Porus is behind you now. Victory? Yes, but a victory that feels heavier than most. The war elephants had fallen one by one, their armored hides steaming in the rain, their trumpets echoing into the mist like horns of some ancient god. Porus himself had fought until his body could give no more, until even his mighty horse lay gasping beneath him. You had taken him prisoner, only to crown him your ally, because here, at the far edge of the known world, friendship was worth more than conquest. But your eyes are still fixed east. You've heard the tales. Beyond the jungles, past the wide rivers, lies the Ganges, its fertile lands dotted with cities richer than Babylon, its shores licked by an ocean that no Macedonian has ever seen. The maps in your mind stretch endlessly, the edges still waiting to be filled in by your own hand. Your men, however, see no maps. They see only the road home, or rather, the endless miles between them and it. Their bronze greaves are green with corrosion. Their sandals are worn through, toes split, and raw from marching in monsoon mud. The rain here does not fall. It drowns, clinging to skin and armor until even sleep feels heavy. And when the liches creep into their boots and the fever sweats wring them dry, they speak of wives whose hair has gone gray without them, of children whose faces they cannot picture anymore. The murmurs begin quietly, passed between campfires like smuggled wine. Some say the omens are bad, that the gods themselves have turned the sky into a swamp to stop your march. Others just count the dead. Every name is another weight on the scale, tipping away from your dream. One evening, in the shelter of a dripping pavilion, your generals approach. Their faces are carved from stone, but their eyes are steady. They tell you what the man will not say to your face. No further. Not for gold, not for glory, not for you. They have bled across the deserts, the high passes, and the rivers, and they will not drown themselves in the jungles of some far-off land. You could order them on. You could make an example of the loudest voices. But as you look across the ranks the next morning, rain misting in the air, you see no rebellion, only exhaustion carved into every cheek and brow. These are not men refusing your rule. They are men at the end of their strength, who have followed you farther than any army has ever gone, and who can give no more without breaking. The moment comes like a knife you've known was coming for weeks. Slowly, in front of the army, you nod. The sound of rain swallows the silence. You tell them they have earned the right to turn back, and a cheer rises. Not the roar of men drunk on victory, but the weary sigh of those who have survived the unthinkable and will live to see home. The dream of the Ganges slips away, a horizon you will never reach. The maps will remain unfinished, their edges frayed and blank. You tell yourself there will be other campaigns, but deep down, you know this was the farthest you will ever go. And in the men's defiance, there is something you can't name, a kind of strength that even you, Alexander, must respect. The monsoon rains fade behind you, replaced by a heat that sears the skin like a brand. Your army turns west, away from the promise of the Ganges, away from the green canopy that dripped with rain and liches and into the open throat of the desert. This is the Gedrosian Desert, its name whispered in stories of caravans that never arrived, of bones ground fine beneath the wind. Others have skirted it, taken the longer northern route through fertile valleys. But you, Alexander, will not turn north. You will not retrace your steps like a beaten man. You will carve a straight line home, no matter the cost. At first, the sand is just sand, dry and soft underfoot, gold in the sun. But day after day, the dunes grow higher. The spaces between watering holes grow wider. Wells you had counted on are dry, their stones hot to the touch. The sky is a flawless, pitiless blue, and the sun presses down like a hand, trying to crush you into the earth. Your men march in silence now, their shields slung over their backs, their helmets replaced with scraps of cloth to keep the heat from splitting their skulls. Some strip their armor entirely, leaving bronze behind in the dunes, too heavy to carry when every step is a negotiation with death. Rations are measured in pinches, water in sips. At night, the wind scours the camp, carrying away tents and burying sleeping men in waves of grit. Horses die first, their bodies dragged to the side and stripped of leather, sinew, and meat. Then the camels follow. When the pack animals are gone, the men stagger under loads themselves, trading pace for survival. It is here, in the heart of the desert, that your army begins to look less like a spear and more like a trail of ghosts. Men see mirages, green groves, deep rivers, cities of marble, and break from the line, vanishing into nothing. Some never return. And yet, you march. You share their rations, walk beside them in the heat, drink only when they drink. More than once, you give your own water to a soldier collapsing in the sand. The desert does not care that you are Alexander, conqueror of the world. It will take you as quickly as it takes the lowest camp follower. But each day you rise, and they rise with you, and the line of weary figures pushes forward. After weeks that feel like lifetimes, the air begins to change. Salt stings your nostrils before you see it, the sea glinting under the sun like a sheet of hammered bronze. Here, on the Macedon coast, there is water again, bitter and briny, but salvation all the same. The desert has taken thousands, more than any battle you have fought, but it has not taken you. The men who remain are gaunt, burned dark by the sun, their eyes set deep in their skulls. They do not cheer, they do not have the strength, but they are alive. And in this place, that is victory enough. The Gedrosian sands close behind you like a door, erasing your path. In years to come, the survivors will tell the story, their voices low, their eyes distant, and always with the same truth. It was not the armies of men that almost broke Alexander. It was the desert, Babylon. The name is a promise in every soldier's mind as you cross the last miles of dust and stone. The river plains spread before you in green and gold, the air thick with the scent of date palms and irrigation water. This is no parched outpost or mountain pass. This is the beating heart of your empire, the place where kings of old ruled from thrones carved before your ancestors had names. The march is slower now, not from exhaustion, but from a strange reluctance. Every step toward the city is a step toward the end of something vast. You left this place as the spear point of an unbroken conquest. You return older, leaner, with an army reduced by deserts, storms, and stubborn rivers. You have not been defeated, but neither have you conquered all you dreamed. Babylon greets you with garlands and music. Crowds throng the streets, tossing flowers before your horses. Merchants display spices from India, gold from Persia, ivory from Africa. A market of the known world, all under your name. Yet beneath the cheers, you can feel it, the murmurs in the court, the eyes of satraps measuring your strength, the subtle shifting of power in your absence. In every hall, there are petitions to settle disputes, uprisings to quash, taxes to collect. Empire is not a thing you set down to rest. It must be carried every day, and you are beginning to feel the weight. You speak of new campaigns, Arabia next, perhaps the western seas. But the old fire burns unsteadily now. You host feasts, plan rituals, oversee building works. Yet your body is not as it was. The cough comes more often. The fevers keep you to your bed. In early June, under the sweltering Babylonian sun, you drink deeply from a bowl of wine. That night, the fever seizes you fully. For days you drift in and out, surrounded by generals who press you for your final word. At last, unable to speak, you gesture that the empire should go to the strongest. The air in the palace is heavy with incense and the low chanting of priests. Outside, the city moves on. Markets open, river barges unload, soldiers drill in the courtyards. And then, in the soft light before dawn, the breath leaves you. No enemy's sword struck you down. No battle claimed you. You simply reached the farthest edge of your dream and could go no farther. The world you forged in less than a decade now lies in the hands of men already eyeing each other as rivals. Some will remember you as the greatest conqueror who ever lived. Others will say you burned too bright, too fast. But all will agree you changed the map, and the age of Alexander will never be forgotten. And now you can let it all go. The dust of the deserts, the glare of the Indian sun, the taste of Babylonian wine, they fade into the quiet of your room. No trumpets here, no clash of spear and shield, only the steady rhythm of your breath. You've walked beside Alexander through every step, felt the grit under his sandals, the weight of the crown, the heat of ambition that pulled him forward, even when the world itself seemed to resist. You've seen the victories, the impossible marches, and the quiet moments when the man beneath the legend looked out over his empire and wondered what was left to conquer. History remembers the lines on the map, the battles won, the cities built in his name. But in the hush before sleep, you can remember something else, the human truth that even the mightiest journey has its end. Alexander's path ended not in defeat, but in the inevitability that comes for all. A last breath, a stillness, a passing from story into memory, so you can breathe out, slow and deep. Imagine the empire stretching from the shores of Greece to the edge of India, not as a conquest, but as a vast horizon fading in the evening light. The noise, the dust, the fever of ambition all soften until there is only the sound of the river, the warmth of the night, the cool stone beneath your hands. You are home, in this moment. The march is over. Let your eyes close. Let the dream of empire dissolve into the dark and drift into your own quiet victories. Sweet dreams.